Hello everyone and welcome back. It is the Path of Fire demo weekend where you can test out the elite specializations, and I'm here with the wonderful, my absolute favorite so far, the Firebrand. Now, I might have mentioned this 100 times already, but because the Firebrand is out, I was going to try to make it as supportive as possible because they both hinted at it in some of the trailers, and just from looking at the traits and the skills, I was gonna make it work because I've always wanted a support guardian, and I think it's working. I'm really pleased so far. Of course, this is PvP, so it's not PvE armor and oriented, even though I have been playing this with the mindset that I'll be bringing this into PvE. So with that said, everything from my utilities to my weapon choices to my traits reflect PvE, but all the stats are PvP based. So with that said, everything out of the way, let's just jump right into the things that I'm taking. I will say that the sigils I haven't played around too much with. I kind of just let them be. So we'll start out with the weapons, the sigils, the rune, and then the amulet. So for my weapons, I'm going to be taking axe and torch for my damage slot. These are the weapons that I'll typically be using when I am in a one-on-one fight and need to do quite a bit of damage. And for my second weapon set, I'll be taking the mace and the shield because this helps with the mantras, because mantras are fairly close ranged. This weapon set is a bit more supportive with the auto attack having a heal, the symbol doing quite a bit of regen, and the third skill providing a bit more Aegis and protection, fourth skill more Aegis, and the fifth skill a really nice heal. So for the sigils, I'm taking Sigil of Compounding, Sigil of Smoldering, Sigil of Cleansing, and Sigil of Absorption. This is PvP focused. But for the rune, I so far have tested the Rune of Water, and I really do enjoy this rune. I think Rune of the Monk might be good for more boon duration. And the amulet I'm taking is Mender's Amulet for the healing power and the power. Sadly, there wasn't a condition damage main stat and healing power main stat amulet, so I decided to compromise for power. If there is a healing power and condition damage main stat, I'll probably be running that, and I'm not too sure if that's going to be a thing in Path of Fire. If it is, that'd be amazing. But those are my weapons, my sigils, my amulet, and my rune choices. Moving on to the juicy stuff, the specializations. I'm taking honors, virtues, and firebrand. Actually, I'm gonna swap down honors. Does anybody else do this? Just for like visual appeal? I don't know. Okay, so for virtues, we'll start out with the virtues. I am taking Unscathed Contender, so deal increased damage while you have Aegis. I thought if I'm taking this in a PvE scenario, the Aegis will be a bit more useful because if you're playing the support, you shouldn't be taking too much damage and you're not getting hit as frequently. In PvP, this might not be such a good trait, but keep in mind this is more PvE focused. For the next trait, I'm taking Absolute Resolution for a stronger Virtue of Resolve passive, and it also increases or regenerates your endurance. And for the Grandmaster, I'm taking Battle Presence to share the passive effect of Virtue of Resolve. Moving on to the Honor trait line, the main support core specialization. I'm taking Protective Reviver. This is both PvP focused and PvE focused. If you take this into a raiding scenario, you'll probably want to get your downed up as quickly as possible, and it grants some Aegis, protection, and regen. Aegis is really important for the Firebrand, and I'll get into that in a little bit. I've also been wondering about invigorating or invigorated bulwark. Because I have mace on my second weapon set, this might be useful. Also, the increased outgoing healing. Next, I'm taking Pure of Heart for the extra heals, especially with the mace and shield combo. There's no real point in taking Honorable Staff. And for a rating scenario, I would definitely see Empowering Might be more useful, but Pure of Heart is good just for flat heals if that ever becomes meta for a raid. And for the Grandmaster, I'm taking Force of Will, increased vitality, and you gain a percentage of outgoing healing based on your vitality. I did play around with Writ of Persistence, but this trait is somewhat weak in my opinion, and I actually thought of perhaps the solution. Instead of it healing every single, tick, because it's fairly minimal, I thought, how about you increase the duration and you increase the radius, but on its final pulse, it will do a larger heal, something like 400 to 500. Something to think about, but, Writ of Persistence might be good in a raiding scenario with a longer fight, and there's no real point in taking Pure Voice unless you swap out the Mantra of Flame, which is more of a damaging mantra, with a Shout, possibly, but I think Force of Will honestly is the best option for the Firebrand support. Moving on to the Big Daddy, the Firebrand, we have the Archivist of Whispers. I'm taking Archivist of Whispers because of the tomes. This is a tome-based build, and the tomes, I must say, especially the Tome of Resolve, is extremely useful and extremely powerful for healing. Other two are more... I guess Liberator's Vow would be nice, but it's on 12-second cooldown. So, in my opinion, the best one to take is probably Archivist of Whispers. Next, I'm taking Stalwart Speed for more support with boons, and this will provide quickness whenever you give Aegis or Stability to someone. And with the Shield being a really nice weapon to provide Aegis with, you're going to get a lot of use out of this if you camp in Mace and Shield. Also, the ultimate, which is Mantra of Liberation, applies Stability, and it's only on a 5-second cooldown. Pretty nice. Legendary Lore, I've thought about it, and I have run with it in a couple games in PvP. The regen is nice. Basically, this gives a secondary effect on every single skill for the tomes. So if I went into... Here, I'll show you right now. If I went into Tome of Resolve, which is a wonderful animation, I'll talk about this in a little bit. See Desert Bloom. It has a base healing, and it also provides regen. The regen would not be there if I did not take this trait. But in my opinion, it's not necessarily worth it. It's not necessarily worth it because it will pulse the boon in an area one time when you go into the tome itself. So it's it is nice regen 2000 healing, but I don't know. I think the quickness is much more useful. And for the final one, I am taking, I'll switch it over. I'm taking a Lore Master. Your tome skills gain reduced recharge, and you retain Virtue's passive effects while they are on cooldown. This helps with battle presence, and it also doubles up with Power of the Virtuous, which reduces your virtues by a flat 15%. So you're getting a 15% virtue reduction. Virtues translate to tomes, and you're getting another 33%. So baseline, Tome of Justice is now on a 25-second cooldown, Tome of Resolve is on a 38-second cooldown, and Tome of Courage is on a 76-second cooldown. Without those perks, Tome of Justice would be on a 30-second cooldown, Tome of Resolve would be on a 45-second cooldown, and Tome of Courage would be on a 90-second cooldown. In my opinion, the 90-second cooldown might be a little bit too long. It is the same as the Elite Signet, which is much more powerful in my opinion. I think if they dropped down the Tome of Courage to 80 seconds or even 85 seconds, just baseline, that would really help with Tome of Courage. And I know it's a trend that the Courage virtue is much longer, but in my opinion, the Tome of Courage, it's nice, but I don't think it's as powerful per se as something like the Tome of Resolve for more support aspects. So those are my traits. I can talk about, honestly, I can do a whole podcast on Firebrand, and this is not my only build that I have. I'm going to make a Condi build as well, but this is my favorite one so far. So with the axe, the weapon skills are Core Cleave, Bleeding Edge, and Searing Slash. Core Cleave, Bleeding Blade, or Bleeding Edge, and Searing Slash all do condition damage. I had a question. I don't know if any of you can answer this. There's a trait called Unrelenting Criticism, which reads, axe skills gain a chance to inflict bleeding. But as I can see, if I take it, there's no like bonuses on the bleeding. There's no bonuses on the symbol bleeding or the blazing edge. So I don't know if it's a tooltip thing or if it's just bugged. Not too sure. But those were the auto attacks. And as I briefly stated, symbol of vengeance, excuse me. It's a purely damaging symbol, which is something very new. We've always had a symbol that will provide a boon. This symbol does not. So there you go. It applies cripple and bleeding. And the final axe skill is Blazing Edge, which is a really nice 600 range pull that will also burn the enemy for quite a decent amount. So what I typically like to do is I like to start, if I'm in a combat situation where I need to defend myself, I'll typically start with 3 and then go into 4 and then blast the 4th one for a fairly bursty fire condition or burning condition. Moving on to the next weapon set. I don't really need to explain this too much. Really support healing, more healing, some Aegis, some more Aegis, and some more healing. It's pretty nice. Let's go over the tomes. And beautiful animation. This is the Tome of Justice, the Burning Tome. You get quite a decent amount of boons when you equip this. You always get quickness when you equip a tome for the Firebrand. So the first one is known as Searing Spell, which does flat damage and it also does 3 seconds of burning. And this is not Viper's gear, so if you have a condition, or if you trait, or if you gear your character for expertise, the burning will increase. Second spell is Igniting Burst, which is an AoE burning and weakness spell. Third one is Heated Rebuke. Oh, I forgot to cast the spell for the first one. Searing Spell, basic cone. Heated Rebuke is a pull. Does not do any condition damage, but it's a nice pull to set it up and then spam the abilities. The fourth one is Scorched Aftermath, and it's a very nice AoE burn and bleed. It's a wonderful animation. Honestly, I must say the Firebrand animations might be my favorite animations on any Elite spec so far. And the fifth one is the Epilogue, Ashes of the Just, which will grant players or allies in an area chances to burn, or not chance, it is burning for your next 3 attacks. And I also have to mention that each tome has a support mechanic. The Tome of Justice and the Tome of Courage might not be direct healing, but they do provide some support, and this is more of a damage support with the Ashes of the Just. So that is the Tome of Justice. Moving on to the Tome of Resolve. Oh, I could just look at these animations for hours. First we have the Desert Bloom, which is a basic AoE cone heal. 1,200 healing for PvP stats. Really nice healing. Next is Radiant Recovery, that will remove 2 conditions and heal for 800 for each condition, or for each condition removed. For the third, we have Azure Sun, which will apply Vigor, Regen, and Swiftness, and has a really nice effect. It's the same thing as a pull, but instead of a pull, it provides boons. The fourth one, which I think is my favorite effect out of all, is Shining River, which is a fairly nice heal, 1,500. Also grants swiftness, and it leaves a water field for people to blast in it and also shoot projectiles through it to grant regen. And the final one, Eternal Oasis. It increases the healing effectiveness on 5 players by 33%. Just like the last one, it allowed a burning. This one will allow more healing. And for the Tome of Courage, we have Unflinching Charge, which applies stability and swiftness. More stability, as you can see here. Got a little bit of quickness. Second one is a Daring Challenge, which is a taunt and a little bit of some damage, which I find very interesting that this is the only damaging mechanic, yet you want the enemy to taunt, or you want the enemy to attack you, but I guess you have really formidable defenses. And for the third skill, we have Valiant Bulwark, which blocks all projectiles. And I'd also like to mention that there is a bug currently, I hope it's a bug, but you can place this down like around a golem in PvP, and if an ally shoots towards the dome, it will destroy the projectile of the allied player. And I have some footage of that. I'll probably put that in somewhere. For the fourth skill, we have Stalwart Stand, which is a beautiful animation, I must say, which applies resistance, 4 pulses. And much like the other two, or the last two tomes, we have Unbroken Lines, which is an AoE plus 300 toughness, and you also grant them protection, retaliation, and stability. And those are the tome skills. Also, I think I really was wondering about this, and I think they answered my questions, and it covered a lot of my worries. If you accidentally swap into a tome, and you have a fairly decent number of pages, and you want to get out of it, as you can see here, the base cooldown is 38 seconds, but if you don't use anything and you swap out of it, it goes down to 32 seconds. So you get a little bit of forgiveness if you accidentally swap to a tome. Those are the tome skills. Now we go into the mantras, which I think are also one of my favorite things about, honestly, everything about the Firebrand is my favorite. We have the healing skill, Mantra of Solace, which is a 3, or I'd also like to mention each mantra has 3 charges. And the third and final charge is much more powerful than the previous 2. For restoring Reprieve, it is the basic one, which will apply Aegis to yourself and allies in front of you in a 300 range. A little bit of healing, and the final one does more healing. I'm not too sure. I think the range of 300, it's really close, but I think I'll just have to get used to it. I was thinking, what if they increase it to 400 range? That might be a little bit more forgiving, but it also might be a little bit too powerful. Just something that came across my mind. Next, we have Mantra of Lore, which applies regen and removes 2 conditions on your allies. And the final one does more regeneration with 12 seconds of regeneration. Nice effect. Honestly, the regen is one of the main reasons why I'm taking this, for extra AoE, or not AoE, well, yeah, it is an AoE dot heal. One of the reasons why I'm taking it. And for the next mantra, we have Mantra of Potence. This one is so much fun. It applies quickness in a range of 300, and you can pretty much stack quickness fairly easily. You can use this, then grant people stability or Aegis. And honestly, this one's just really fun. And the final charge does more quickness and even more might. I'd also like to mention it provides 5 stacks of might, so more damaging support. And for the final one, I decided to take a Flame Rush, or Mantra of Flame, just for some more burning. So if I want to do something like Blazing Edge into Zealot's Flame, then to shoot Zealot's Fire, and then shoot Flame Surge, or go into Tome of Justice and just do a bunch of burning and spam Flame Surge at the same time, you get a lot of burning with this build, and especially if you spec for condition damage, it's insane. And for the final mantra, the elite mantra, we have Mantra of Liberation, which applies stability, retaliation, and for the final charge, it also applies swiftness and 3 stacks of stability instead of just 1. So those are the mantras. Not too much else to say, other than I love it, and I'm sorry if this video is really long, but I can talk about this for hours. With that being said, I have some gameplay, and I would like to now transition to that gameplay and do a little bit of a voiceover. And yeah, I'll see you over on the gameplay, everyone. Bye-bye. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the gameplay portion. I'm just going to be reacting for what I see on the screen. I haven't really prepared too much, but you can see the game starting, and I channeled my mantra that grants quickness. So what I like to do is I charge that one first, and then I use that once, charge a mantra, and then I can probably get a second mantra in before the quickness expires. So you can get 2 mantras loaded fairly quickly. And then you use the mantra again, and then finish off your elite mantra and your last mantra, whichever one you have left. So you can see me going in here, and I start off in the Tome of Resolve. I'd also like to briefly mention something that I didn't mention in the build video, is that personally I've noticed that I can stay in the tomes for quite a decent amount of time. I remember one particular game that won't be shown here, possibly in another video just for background footage, but I very rarely was swapped in my weapon skills because I was playing the tomes with a mindset of strategy. I was like, I'm going to use this skill, use that skill, always use my mantras as well. I wasn't constantly using my tome skills, even though I had it equipped. I'd also use my mantra skills because it's an ammunition mechanic and they come back online. And yeah, I just wanted to point that out. I could stay in there for quite a while. So that's one thing that I've been trying to do more often, is just see how long I can stay in the tomes. And of course, if the situation doesn't call for it, and if the situation calls for more damage or for some more defense, switch to the appropriate tome. See me here, always trying to start out with my 5th skill on the Tome of Resolve. And just as like a broad statement, I try to always start out with the 5th skill, because the 5th skill is more of a support in the sense that it will allow your enemies or allow your allies to do more damage to the enemies, allow you to do more healing, or just allow you to survive longer with the extra toughness on the Tome of Courage. See me here focusing on supporting my allies, trying to camp in mace and shield for as long as possible. And you might have noticed with my passives healing, it does about 372, rough estimate, or round up to about 400. And with regen, it's an extra 240, I believe, or something like that. So you're getting about 600 passive healing every couple seconds. And this is not even ascended healing gear with food and delicious rice balls and all that stuff. So you can already get a decent amount of healing in PvP, and I can't wait to take this out in a raid and see how it does. So I switched over to the Tome of Justice for some extra damage, trying to weaken foes so they don't do as much damage, and of course using my 4th skill for a big AoE. Charging up my mantras. I guess I ended up using all 3 charges. That's one thing I try not to do, is use all 3 charges unless I desperately needed it, because I didn't want to have to wait 25 seconds, because the Guardian mantras, or the Firebrand mantras, are on a much longer cooldown if you use them in comparison to the Mesmer mantras. So go back into my Tome of Resolve and just getting some more healing. And I'll be finished up with this fight here. Right now, that was just a clone, and we're transitioning to the next fight, which is at the very same point, actually, still at the clock tower. But there was this very, very deadly Mesmer, and she was giving me a rough time. And that's one thing that I've noticed with the Firebrand. It could just be because we have had very little experience, is that the Firebrand can be easily bursted and focused down, especially if you're stuck in your tome, because you'll have to switch out of your tome, you'll have to get your bearings on which skills you have if you ended up, or if you left your weapon skills to a tome, like which weapon did you leave off on? Did you leave off on your axe? Did you leave off on your mace? You have to keep that in mind as well. Or don't constantly keep it in your mind, but it's something that plays a factor into the fights. So more people are ganging up on us, and I ended up going down here, and I was so sad, and I ended up dying, and the Mesmer was really, really deadly. Definitely condition cleansing is important, and that's one thing that the Firebrand has a little bit of trouble with. I know the mantra and the Tome of Resolve are really good at that, but you only have a limited amount of those skills. And we get back into the fight here, and just charging up my tomes, and I'll transition to the next fight. You can see here that I go in with a ally, and being a support, you always want to try to go into fights with people to heal and to support. And so we were fighting this engineer, and I have to say, before you saw this fight, I ended up trying to 1v1 this NG, and this Hollow Smith, I should say, the Hollow Smith was so bursty. I mean, he was fairly squishy himself, but he could pump out a lot of damage, especially with the Photon Blitz, I think it's called. It's a Photon Forge 4th skill with just go guns a-blazing. And we're going back to the clock tower. I guess I just really love the clock tower on this fight, but going back in with Ashes of the Just to do a little bit more burning, and we have to encounter this Mesmer. And I tried to back off because I know what she's capable of, and I didn't want to be a part of that. I didn't want to die, so I backed off. There was a thief that was trying to come from my booty, so I was like, I'd rather not be assaulted. So I backed off, and thankfully this Mesmer went down. I got her down, so I didn't have to worry about her. And then we're just going back on point. More of a mini fight, nothing too intense, not like the very beginning fight, but trying to pull people off the point, get a little bit more CC, throw them off guard, going back into my Tome of Resolve for extra healing. That fourth skill is really useful, especially if you have any allies that have a lot of blast finishers. Like if you had a scrapper per se, I know scrapper won't necessarily be as used as much as the hollow smith, but if you had a scrapper and they used their hammer 3 and they just did 3 blast finishers, that would be amazing. But any blast finisher is good with the water fields. Continuing to use my mantras, I always try to predict what I'll need, and see here, that's a great example of the ultimate mantra. I was caught in a gravity well, and the ultimate has an ammunition mechanic, but it's also a stun break, and it grants stability and retaliation. Whenever I'm caught in a gravity well or a perfect weave, now with the weaver, I always try to use that skill if it's up. If I happen to use the final charge, then I'm gonna be in some trouble, but thankfully I was not in that situation here. And you can see here that I'm just contemplating on whether or not to go help my allies or to stay at the point, and I had a sneaking suspicion something would happen. And spoiler alert, it was Mesmer again. And being a support, I probably should not have done this, but I was feeling cocky, and I'm like, I must defend the point. I must be useful. So I went into Tome of Fire, trying to do as much burning damage as possible, but this Mesmer was jumping around all over the place, so I switched over to Mason Shield, a little bit more sustain. Thankfully, the match was over, but that was just a little tussle. Thank you everyone for watching. Subscribe for more content. Like the video if you liked it. And I have referral links down below. Hope you guys enjoyed. And, yeah. Outro. Bye, everyone. Mwah.